Found that with being in a relationship with someone else who had different experiences and therefore different biases, things are bound to get complicated. When things are complicated, we want to make it easier. So a lot of times we say that the other person can handle that. We go into division of labor, and traditionally people feel like the man has a better handle on money. I have definitely not found that to be the case, but a lot of times that role gets abdicated to the male in the relationship, and you to talk about things. So whatever that role doesn't change the fact that you're often not getting information. You're not getting the information, you're not sharing information, and that ends up harming you because you don't have the ability to share with people what it is that you want to do, how you feel about money or about decisions that are going on in your lives. So meeting with a professional to talk things out lets each person share their opinions and their points of view. It helps elucidate goals and visions for the future. Usually parties have different risks factors or different things that they feel comfortable doing. And getting that out in the open is a way of sharing and ensuring that each person is heard. Sometimes just going through the discussion is helpful because one can realize their plan's too risky, it's too aggressive, or too conservative. One of my friends has a very successful and bright husband. He takes care of all the long-term planning. Monthly bills, has access to accounts and a spreadsheet where everything is. Though she says if God forbid something happens, her first call after the funeral home would be to me. She's not a big spender. She has a larger house than she needs and plenty of money for vacations, her children, charitable donations. But just this month, she shared with me a disturbing story. Her husband got an investment tip from a well-heeled family member. And they both invested in this venture, as did her brother. It turns out that the guy running the investment mismanaged the operation and it went bust. She was so disappointed to learn that her brilliant husband, and he really is brilliant, never inquired from the other relatives how much money they were investing. So when the venture went south, it was then that they learned that his investment was more than twice as large as the other family members. No one was being deceitful besides the shady guy who maybe mismanaged the operation. But my friend would have talked it out with her husband and maybe learned how much the other people were actually investing. And that could have prevented them from, in this case, knows more about investing in money than she does, and she fully trusts him. But she has good sense and would have scoped out the opportunity from a different angle. I think getting another perspective is essential. The rationale for an investment and being able to expound on its attributes is a good exercise to see how it fits in with someone's portfolio, needs, and risk tolerance. That's something that typically happens when meeting with a financial advisor, testing out theories and scenarios and hearing what actually is realistic. So different scenarios can be simulated to see what the outcome could be and then figure out what makes sense and what plan to be doing going forward. So there's some couples who are disciplined and cooperative and sit down regularly to budget and talk about saving and sharing information. That's terrific. Doing that as a couple builds trust and communication, and you feel like you have a common purpose and directions. When things go well, it really helps to build marriages. I found that those couples that do that often are, have a good communication model in their relationship, and they have shared values of steering the ship together. So I'm noticing that my slide went back. Okay, so using the analogy of a ship, sorry about that, we can see how many elements need to be in place before we can even set out on our voyage. First, we need a well-maintained ship, boating insurance, a knowledgeable captain, a date to embark and return, a route laid out, provisions for our journey, and a backup plan for poor weather or sick passengers. And we hope there are no pirates or crazy storms on our journey. So too with our financial plan. We hope for the best, but certainly need to have some alternate plans and mitigate risks that could throw us off course or, God forbid, overboard. A lot of us are already on the ship and the waters may be rocky. Let's talk about what needs to be in place and what to do if we are in stormy waters. Firstly, you need to know what accounts that you have. That would be savings or checking. Those accounts need to also be looked at. Just because you have them, they still need to be gone over from time to time. It's not like something that just sits and doesn't need to constantly be checked on. Of course, not daily, because that gives people tons of anxiety. But you need to make sure that you feel good about the short term and that you have access to money for immediate needs, and that in the long term, you're looking towards accumulation towards future goals. If there are possible inheritances that you may be aware of, you should know that those are generally not classified as marital assets. Your inheritance or trusts may only go to you, and conversely with your spouse. That could play a role in how you think about things if you don't see your marriage lasting into old age. So sometimes women are in relationships where they're not aware of certain accounts. That could be a problem if money from a joint account is siphoned off to these other unknown accounts, or if money earned from working is not going into these accounts. In the case of divorce, you wouldn't be able to figure out what your share is because you would have only knowledge and access to the regular accounts, and there could be some other accounts, business or otherwise, that you wouldn't have knowledge of. I have a friend who has been battling in the Israeli courts for over 5 years to find the account and true value of her ex-husband's business. This gets complicated, expensive, and is draining emotionally and financially. Lawyers and courts sap up the energy out of everyone. And when you're dealing with a divorce, either starting the divorce or even after you're divorced and negotiating alimony or settlements or doing a lot of stuff post facto, maybe after you get your get, that expense is doubled because each side is paying legal fees. Another problem that comes up with women who prefer not to deal with the finances or are just happy to let someone else take care of things. They have an allowance or get cash. Sometimes it's a generous amount. So they can buy what they need for the household. They have money for personal expenses and purchases. So they don't want to rock. So they have, so they feel like we're okay. But they don't actually have access to accounts. They only are having access to the money that is doled out to them. First of all, they're at the mercy of someone else, and that truly ends up shifting the power in a relationship. The saying that money is power is often so true, especially when the husband's the larger wage earner. It can put the wife in a secondary and uncomfortable position. It's important to have unfettered access to money and accounts to prevent financial abuse, and for you to have the ability to check those accounts and hopefully to see if something wrong may be going on. It is unfortunate that we hear of so many cases, and I hear of way more than you do, because a lot of women come to me in crisis, where the wife didn't know that her spouse was involved in illegal activities or covering up a business problem by raiding personal accounts. Often the wives are in the dark and they're not aware of any problems until it's too late. I've had clients who may have known there are business problems and tried to address them with their husbands. They had a frank discussion. Okay, the business needs to be separate, and we're not touching our retirement accounts. That's money that's like hands off. Unfortunately, if you don't meet with a financial advisor or an accountant or going through retirement statements, which are always individual, so if your spouse is rating his retirement, you wouldn't see it unless you had a frank discussion, a meeting with an advisor to see where that account is at. So those monies can be pulled without your knowing. And then when, the problem gets too large and everything, gets uncovered, the money is gone. I've seen that happen. It decimates people's finances and families. Which brings me to another key point. Women need to have money in their own name, especially retirement. All right, let's go into the retirement accounts. When women work, they need to be putting money into their retirement accounts. I'm sorry, why is my computer being sketchy? Hold on one sec. I apologize. So minimally, they should do up to the corporate match. Many companies will match up to 3 or 5% of your salary that you're putting into the company retirement plan. So if you're not taking advantage of that, you're leaving money on the table. Benefits, usually the company match, is something that you retirement and the company then matches it. So you're able to really increase what your money can do for your retirement by taking part in that. I met with a couple last year. She's the breadwinner, the more sophisticated of the two. And even though she worked as a CFO at a hedge fund, she wasn't taking advantage of the company match until we went through her full financial picture and we spoke about retirement savings. She quickly made that change, and that she doesn't even feel like she's missing that money. The money is doing so much good. She's putting the money in a pre-tax account. Her company is matching it, and it is growing in a tax advantage vehicle. So that is like so many advantages, but just by doing like the simple step of making sure that you're contributing, at least up to your company match. Another thing that I go over when I meet with people, and that's so benefits. Oftentimes there's discounts because you're part of a larger group on life insurance or a long-term disability insurance, which protects people from often bankruptcy, losing their house, by having insurance paid to you while you're disabled from a sickness or from a permanent disability. Even if you're not working outside the home or helping in a family business, you can still make sure that you have life insurance and you can still contribute to a personal individual retirement account called an IRA up to $6,000 as a non that. It helps you personally and it helps your family because there are limits on what your spouse can contribute. So if your spouse maximized, it's an opportunity for your family to do another $6,000 in an individual account for you. And it's important that you have money and accounts in your name. So discussing insurance together is very important. Having life insurance protects the people left behind and can also be used as an estate planning tool. Depending on the family dynamics, it often makes sense to divide the money that's allocated for insurance between the couple and make sure that there's life insurance on each person. Life insurance can enable a parent to work less during the time where the family's healing and adjusting. So even if a woman's not contributing so much financially to the family, she's for sure doing so many things, and her loss wouldn't just be an emotional loss, it would be an economic loss as well, because there's for sure things that would be needed to be taken care of by a professional. You would need to hire more cleaning service, more laundry help, any of those things, and having a cushion of life insurance money after her passing would be helpful. Additionally, in all likelihood, the other spouse would not want to be working as much because they would want to be helping the family heal and adjust. And at this point, that money would also give some breathing room while the family is regulating itself to the new reality. When using it as part of an estate plan, since insurance proceeds are not taxable, sometimes it makes more sense to insure the wife in the situation, since insurance rates for women are less expensive. And sometimes they are the younger person in the relationship, and so often they're the healthier person in the relationship. Since women often are better planners and more risk averse, if they're involved in the planning, they may advocate for getting. That's usually a wise strategy, since life insurance rates increase with age, and medical issues could also increase the costs. And in certain cases, poor medical history can even make someone uninsurable. So taking care of putting life insurance in place in the earlier part of your relationship sets a tone for sound financial planning. Retirement savings is crucial, and proper planning for that is really key. It's important to position your investments to give off money in retirement, pure monthly income. So, if we're so busy saving for retirement, a lot of times we feel like, okay, we are set. But having a plan in place is so important, because one of the large costs in retirement is medical care. And often that is long-term care. When someone is ill and needs extra help in the home, assisted living, or nursing home care. That could derail the financial security in retirement, even if you were so busy saving and being conservative. Because at the beginning of your retirement, when you want to be spending money, when generally you're healthier and are more interested and able to go on trips and do more exciting and expensive things, if you're worried about what happens in 10 years, in 15 years, when you may need long-term care, you may hold back on how you're spending the money earlier in your retirement, because you need to save for that large expense down the road. So having a long-term care insurance plan in place enables your retirement to hopefully be happier and go more smoothly. Because in the beginning of retirement, when you feel energized to take that trip or to do like a fun adventure with your grandchildren, you'll know that what could happen later in retirement, the long-term care need, is taken care of by a pool of money that you've set up, so that while of course there's so many unknowns, you're not held back by the lurking large medical expenses that you are concerned could be down the road. Long-term care is also discounted for married couples, whether they purchase policies or they purchase one that covers both of them. There's so many different types of long-term care products and so many different specifics. So we're not remotely going to discuss that. But the one, I would say the two takeaways you should have is, one, how important it is, to think about, once you're in your 40s or older. And the other element is to consider it before your marital status of your marriage, no matter if the other partner is purchasing a policy or not, just by virtue of being, the costs are lower, somewhere between 10 and 25%. So that is something significant if you're thinking about a change in your marital status, or even if you're going through a divorce now. Divorces are taking longer than ever in the Corona environment. That's something that you can start and get put in place that could just feel as if that's, one element in your financial plan that you made inroads into attacking. By going through all different scenarios and getting our ducks, we can go knowing that we have knowledge and plans in place to protect the people that we love and our own futures. As we've seen in the past 5 months, there's so many unknowns between health, job security, relationships, synagogues, the economy, our social lives, being prepared is so crucial. One of the important elements that I feel is really important in preparedness is to make sure that you have a will. Spelling out what should be done with your estate, no matter how small it is, how it will be divided, and who would be the guardian for your children. Often couples put off doing a will because they don't want to deal with that, and they can't decide who would get their kids. I always say that by not deciding, that's like giving your kids to your sister-in-law, Barbara, who you both agree would be the absolute worst pick. It may take compromise, and it could be a more unique choice, a trusted friend, or a favorite aunt, but let the choice be yours and not fought out in family court or by the first person that speaks up. That also goes for having a healthcare proxy and living will. Make sure that these are all done. And that's and that means, meeting with an attorney, addressing these issues. And also, depending on your situation, an attorney will hopefully help you title assets in terms of how they would be passed along, assets for how they are listed in terms of between you and your spouse that, could really affect what could happen in the case of premature death or divorce. And it also is important how assets are titled for your minor children. Even if the grandparents are doing it, the titling of that is really important for when you fill out college age forms, and when you also could be for taxes. Another important person is to have an accountant, not just a number cruncher, but someone who you individually or as a couple sit down with to discuss strategies on how to save money on taxes and planning in a tax advantage. That you have someone who's meeting with you and reviewing your retirement accounts and insurance policies. I sometimes come across old beneficiaries, and that no one likes to see that there is a former spouse on a 401k plan. And just uncovering these kind of things spurs people to look at their accounts, possibly take action. Hold on one second. I don't know what is happening, but my battery is showing super low. So 1 second break. I apologize.
No problem. Take your time. Also, for all the participants who are on, if you have questions that you're thinking about, I invite you to put them into the chat box.
Okay, sorry. I guess Zoom is using lots of power. So I met with a couple in June who has been slow to take action, really dragging their feet. And we went over their accounts, and I had some recommendations. And it spurred the husband to look at his different retirement accounts. His wife was my initial point of contact, and 2 days after the meeting, she called to thank me profusely. She said her husband is literally doing a jig around the house. He's been so stressed. They have 5 daughters. He's really stressed about yeshiva bills and college and all of those things. And when he went through all his former retirement accounts, he was pleased to see that he has close to $1 million between them, far greater than he anticipated. He's 53, and he let a lot of things, slide. Now he's pulling all those accounts. into his current employer. Sometimes that cuts down on fees. They're small fees, but everything counts. And he'll now be able to see an aggregate of where his money is, because it's going to be in one spot. Between them, he and his wife have 4 Ivy League degrees, but they needed a meeting to sit down to get them on the same page and to just do some financial housekeeping. If you suggest sitting down with the third party and your spouse is you should be concerned, particularly now when people aren't so busy with social commitments or commuting. It's a really good time to check on how your boat is being steered. Is it on the right path? Are safety precautions in place? Is it being steered to the desired location? There's nothing wrong with making a change, and it's often healthy and wise, but it needs to be done with knowledge and honesty. If not, you may be looking for a life vest when you feel a huge wave hit, or you're drowning in really uncomfortable waters. A third party gives you the opportunity to discuss information and viewpoints are exchanged. And sometimes having that person, another person there, is able to navigate differences and develop a financial plan incorporating both people's needs. Or sit down by yourself and see where your finances are going. Use a resource to track your expenses, savings, how you're budgeting, how your assets are growing. There's an app called Mint, mint.com, that does that. You can see how you're spending, where your money is going. Often when we look at these things, people realize that they might be keeping too much in cash. A general rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of monthly expenses to have on hand, completely liquid, in case of a big expense or a layoff. We've seen so many people's lives upended this year in 2020 by Corona. So ignorance isn't bliss. You need to know that you have that emergency fund in place. You need to know that you have the ability to access money should you need it. And then you need to take the other funds that hopefully you have and put those towards retirements and investments in a risk profile that you're comfortable with, knowing what's going on. Ignorance is not bliss. It's a rabbit hole of potential misery and financial insecurity. Right now, there's so many unknowns, and I feel like you can't afford for your money or your family's money to be an unknown as well. It puts your future and maybe your children time of people taking stock of their priorities, relationships, money. Don't let this time and opportunity pass you by. Get educated, be informed, and take action. Be empowered and ready to take on the world when hopefully sometime really soon, normalcy returns. So I know I went over so many different things. So please let me know if there's any questions you have. That's my contact information, which is hopefully on the screen. And if it's like a very personal thing, I am so happy to address it, just the two of us. So you don't need to ask online now, but feel free to shoot out any general questions or things that you want clarity on.
Shanna, that was such, no pun intended, a wealth of information. Thank you. I know that I learned a lot. I actually have questions also, but I want to ask one that's in the chat box. And that is, can you talk about what to be on the lookout for and how to go about prenuptial agreements? Are these standardized? How do you build in parameters regarding differences in salaries and savings going into a marriage, and also considering the value of childcare, taking time off work, supporting a spouse, etc.?
Okay, so that's great. I actually like have a talk that I give about, like starting out, which is different from this one, but let me address some of those things. So I think in our community, prenups are not standard. And there's a diversity in how it's received when someone talks about, let's do a prenup. Having said that, I encourage both parties, the one who is drawing up a prenup and then, the party that needs to be signing it, to have their own attorneys and go through it and make sure that that you're comfortable with the language and iron out a document that you both feel good about. I think it's really important pre-marriage to talk about a lot of things. And until you're really commingling funds, you may not understand how people spend money, value money, and things could change because sometimes, people are, doing well and seem to be on the same page when they're navigating things as a couple. But then as parents, some are more indulgent. Some are like, let my kid work for that. Some are like, I want my kid to go to whatever school they want. So there, as you go through life, layoffs, career changes, children, unexpected pregnancies, unexpected illness. Sometimes the breadwinner in the relationship could change. That alters the dynamic. So there's so many different things. Of course, the most important thing is communication and feeling that you're like steering the boat together and everyone has a role, and not to devalue the role that might be for, one of the parents staying home when the children are younger, or someone needing to step out of the workforce to care for someone in the family who's ill, be it a parent or a child. I have a friend who's a doctor, and when her son was 5.5 years old, he was diagnosed with a very serious form of cancer. And she spent the year back and forth with Sloan Kettering. She didn't work. All her medical knowledge was, going to her son's condition. And I'm happy to say that, it all worked and he's, thriving and just graduated high school. But there's so many twists and turns. You can't possibly anticipate everything. So I think what's most important is that you're with someone who feels that your opinion, concerns, and values are valued and that they matter. As I started out, like that you have a seat at the financial table. Whether you brought the whole meal, you should still, your vote counts and it should matter.
I love the metaphor of having a seat at the table. And so what is your advice for those of us who are in positions to guide and advise, whether we're parents, whether we are involved in synagogue life and Jewish communal life? What is your guidance for those of us who are in a position to influence and guide, especially couples who are starting out to get off on the right foot? What do you recommend that we do other than send them to you?
Thank you. So I think that it's important that they have like a go-to resource. So it's great if they if their parents have a financial advisor or their parents are someone they trust and can go to for information. It could be like a great uncle, either he's great or great in terms of like he's older. It could be either. I just feel like it's so important to have a third party to bounce ideas off of, particularly because, unfortunately, a lot of time it's the woman in the relationship that feels like she has less knowledge, she has less power, she has less earning, possibly at this point, maybe even potential. You know, a lot of times women are in lower wage earning positions. Sometimes, you know, out of choice, that's where their passions lie. And that works for the couple dynamics in terms of, you know, building a financially secure family. But it often changes the dynamic in terms of the woman having a voice. And I feel like it's really important to start out with, you know what? I don't feel so comfortable spending so much money on rent. That's going to make us like really tight. You know, I feel like we're going to want to, you know, before we have children, go on vacation. You know, like I'm used to like buying new clothes. I don't want to be like putting all our money towards rent and feeling in a tight position. So making sure that when you're having those conversations, you're really being heard. And that's why I feel like not, you know, I don't think people need financial advisors or necessarily a third party in negotiating, you know, what apartment to rent or buy or whatever. Much like angst and self-worth and, you know, mixed messages that we each have internally, having like someone to bounce it off of sometimes helps us formulate what we really think. And then we're better prepared to present our position to, you know, the other person in the relationship as well.
I'll ask one more question before we sign off. What do you recommend to families who both spouses are working full-time, but they have multiple children in private day school, in Jewish day school, as so many of us make that choice? What do you recommend to them in order to create a safety net when so much of their earnings goes towards living, you know, in a community and walking distance to their synagogue and synagogue dues and tuition and whatnot?
Right. So I feel like that is a huge, huge problem. You know, sometimes it didn't seem like a problem when you were having that fourth child, and then there was an economy downturn. There was a change in the area of your business. There was some sort of financial setback. And I would say to, you know, to try as much as possible to still contribute to retirement. One thing that I, you know, tell people, a little less in the yeshiva day school model and more in terms of college, because I help people with college planning and trying to, you know, get the best package they can from a university, is I tell parents there are other ways to pay for college. Some of them are not good ways. I you know, this isn't about, you know, college funding or spending, but there are definitely poor ways to be doing that. But there are different ways. You can get money from the government. You can get money from your child applying to communal, state, or like different, you know, interesting type of scholarships. There's a gazillion out there. You know, you have to get many to make it really add up. But sometimes it's 2,000 there and 1,500 there, and that could really make a difference. You can get aid through the university that you're going to, or occasionally through, if, you know, you're going into nursing. Sometimes there are, you know, nursing kind of scholarships from national organizations. There is no retirement scholarship. There is no one who's funding your retirement. It's going to be funded based on your savings, up plans in place, making sure that you're starting Social Security at the right time, not doing it too early. That has a real negative consequence on monthly benefits going forward. Making sure sometimes that you take certain assets and put them into an annuity so you're guaranteed monthly income along with your Social Security. And making sure that your investments in retirement are diversified, so if there's a downturn and you need to take out money, you can take it out of one pot instead of the other to let that other pot grow once that sector of the economy or of your investments improves. So I think trying to still maintain, even if it's not a foot in your retirement plan, even if it's 2 toes, I think that that's helpful. Not losing sight of you have to constantly be building that retirement nest egg. So I think there are lots of different, small tweaks that we can make, to our budget to hopefully, find some wiggle room. But I think, and right now in Bergen County, I don't know if there's anyone in Bergen County who's listening, but it's been like all over one of the local Jewish newspapers. Someone wrote in about how awful the scholarship process was. And there have been so many people in different segments of the community, many of whom have served on scholarship boards in the past, who are currently evaluating applications, et cetera, who said that that's not the case. Thankfully, in our communities, we have donors and we have people who went through the system, who've raised their children, who are giving back as donors. And I think it's important for people to, if they feel a need, particularly if they have multiple children in the yeshiva day school system, to apply for aid that might help them not feel in a chokehold. Because feeling in a chokehold is bad for families. It's bad for marriages. And it is, and it's really a detriment to what we want yeshiva to be. We want to feel good about sending our kids to yeshiva. And so many people feel like they're struggling. And it's a big problem, now in the United States, how many communities are unaffordable to young people. And those people that were young people 10, 12 years ago who didn't think that it was unaffordable, now are to really just go over all your expenses, sometimes have, a second pair of eyes on it, and to, stay the course. And if you need it, apply for aid. So many times people are, don't know what their neighbors are doing, or looking at what their neighbors are doing, and don't realize, all the different dynamics that go into every family's financial picture. And I feel like, look at your own, hone in on your own, grow your assets. And if you need help, ask for it, either from a financial professional, from the federation, from the school. So you don't, go to sleep at night, completely stressed because your next tuition payment is in 4 days. I think that huge problem in our communities, that we're all grappling and trying to find a different model so that people can feel better and more successful while raising families and sending kids to yeshiva day school.
Thank you, Shanna. That was, like I said, a wealth of information, a lot of food for thought. I know that you have my mind churning. I have no doubt you've our participants' minds churning. And I want to thank you for taking the time from your schedule to give us this guidance. It was, again, no pun intended, incredibly valuable. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure, a pleasure. Take care. Be well, everybody.